Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's funny how you change as the years pass. I know I'm going on about this quite a lot at the moment. I'm pretty sure that... It's funny, we've just been talking about my school days. I'm pretty sure that when I first started doing this job, I'd be very much at the front of the queue to tell the kids who are today protesting about climate change to shut the flip up and get back into the classroom. I don't think I'm under any illusions about that. I genuinely think that is what my response would have been. For two reasons. Number one, I didn't really have a proper understanding of climate change science, or indeed the rhetoric surrounding it, or indeed of why so much money and effort has been put into poo-pooing and denying it. That's really easy to work out. Just look at the profits that you can make out of fossil fuels. It doesn't matter if you're killing your grandchildren, there's money to be made, and the more you can flog, the more you can make. That's a simplistic but utterly inarguable observation. The second point, I think, would just come from just a slightly old-fashioned attitude where Victorian, an overthrow of or a throwback to Victorian times, this notion that children should be seen and not heard. But I was completely wrong about that. What I want you to tell me is twofold today. I don't want to have a debate about whether or not these children should be going on strike, because that's how problems start. That's like having a debate about whether or not you should vaccinate your children against MMR. The minute you start having a debate, it gives oxygen to the dangerous idea that you shouldn't. And if you give oxygen to the dangerous idea that you shouldn't vaccinate your children, then you don't get to be surprised when nearly 300 measles cases get diagnosed in America last year alone. That's the second highest number since its eradication. 1 month into 2019, the numbers are going up again. Did you know that if you were a parent in the 50s, you would know that your child would at some point contract measles, right? It was almost inevitable. Highly contagious, fever, rash, you know that. Most parents, when their child got measles, needed only to work out childcare, take a few days off, and the child would get better. But this is in America in the 1950s. About 500 sets of parents, every year would have to plan funerals. That's why vaccines exist. So 1963, the first measles vaccine. Back in 2000, it was officially eliminated. And that is roughly when people started claiming that you shouldn't vaccinate your children. And that is why, since 2008, it's been creeping back. In Washington state alone, 35 people, mostly children, have been diagnosed with measles since January the 1st of this year. That has prompted the state's governor to declare a state of emergency. And that is why we're not having a debate today about whether or not these children should be going on strike, because that lends itself to a debate about whether or not they're right or wrong. And that's not a debate. They are right. Some very shady, mysterious, undeclared money is spent well into the billions to bankroll lobby groups masquerading as educational charities and think tanks, trying to persuade you on behalf of the money they refuse to reveal the source of, that the scientists are all wrong and some half-witted blogger from the Daily Telegraph has got all the answers. Okay, that's, again, a statement of fact. And when you look at what's happened with MMR, and you know, if you're kind enough to listen to this programme on a regular basis, that I trace all of the false equivalents in the news, all of the, what Donald Trump's own secretary called alternative facts, the idea that a consigliere to one of the most senior politicians on the planet can stand up in public and talk with a straight face about alternative facts, as if, that there are alternatives to the facts, that it's either a fact or it's not a fact. A bit like alternative medicine, actually, but alternative facts. That is how we've ended up in this mess. And I trace it back, oddly, to climate change and MMR. The only bit of my argument symmetry that doesn't work is the money on the vaccine side of it. I don't see how anybody makes a ton of money out of that. I know that one of the people responsible very early on for poo-pooing the MMR vaccine had a financial investment in an alternative to it, but that only explains his motivation. It doesn't really explain. And also, the MMR vaccines, you don't generally find them in buildings full of hard-right lobby groups masquerading as think tanks, but you will find their pro-Brexit, quotes, economists, end quotes. You'll find people claiming to represent taxpayers while actually doing the opposite. You'll find people claiming to be indulging in economic affairs while actually just offering access to politicians in return for money. You don't see the MMR story there so much. It leads in a different direction to the gates of Great Ormond Street Hospital, for example, where if a terminally ill child inside has parents who have gone public with their misery and heartbreak, some self-serving opportunists in the media and politics, or of course both, will see their plight and their heartbreak as an opportunity for a bit of promotion, a bit of power. I haven't quite got my head around yet what the relationship is between the three things. You can see the relationship between climate change and Brexit. There's huge amounts of money to be made by getting people to act against their own interests. But on the MMR, I don't see it. But I do see the state of emergency that's been declared in Washington. So when I come to climate change, the question I always have in my mind is an odd one, actually, and I don't think you'll see this one coming. Why don't I care more? My kids get it. I don't think they're on strike today. I'm sure they would have told me if they were. My daughter's primary school is one of the most polluted in the country because it's next to an extremely busy road. I know that the science is correct. I know that the stories now are assuming a momentum that suggests if this generation, if people who are on this planet now don't act soon, very soon, then the planet as we know it will, well, the planet as we know it will cease to exist. It will become unrecognisable to what it is now. I know that's true, but I don't feel the sense of urgency. I also know, as someone who does this for a living, that the invitation to you today to call me is a hell of a lot easier to write when we're talking about a 19-year-old girl from Bethnal Green stuck in a Syrian refugee camp, which in the great scheme of things doesn't really matter. In the great scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. And this really does. But it's a million times harder for me to sell. But young people do get it. So there's two questions. One is, why don't I care more? 03456060973. Number two is, what's happened generationally? So that, what age are we going to put on it? Is it anybody under 30? Anybody educated with a half-decent education under the age of 30 feels this so keenly? And the reason why this action is happening in schools today is because they look at their own parents, I presume. They look at the adults in their lives and they do not see a sense of urgency. And children must find that utterly baffling. I don't know if it plays a role in the exponential increase in some mental health issues that young people have fallen prey to in recent years. But I often try and work out what it is. What are the massive changes in our lives that have seen a huge increase in anxiety, for example, and depression? And I just tried to work out what's different about being 12 now from when I was 12, 35 years ago. And you've got the obvious stuff, like the astonishing array of choices. It's quite a weird one, this. I think I'm onto something with this, because we've all been into restaurants with enormous menus and felt intimidated by the size of the menu. When we were kids, you'd go into a restaurant and the menu would have about 6 things on it, and you'd pretty much know before you went in what you were going to have. I'm not talking about menus, I'm talking about life. The menu of life that a 12-year-old can look at now. Not just what can I do in the future, but what can I do this evening? What can I do tonight? What am I going to do? We had, 3 television channels, depending on your age, and no internet. Mobile phones were a distant dream. You saw them on Star Trek. Now, you hand every 12-year-old in the country a menu that is the size of War and Peace. When I was a kid, you could get it all on a postcard. Those were my choices. So I think that must add to the anxiety of young people. I really do. And one of the other massive changes between their generation and ours is the consciousness and knowledge of climate science, and the fact that the world is imperiled. And yet I can sit here as a 47-year-old father of 2 and use words like imperiled and mean what I say and know what it's true and not feel this, I don't know, this gnawing sense. Is it imminence? Is it so the young woman in Syria, she could be here tomorrow. So we've got to care about it. Climate science still fails to deliver a sense of imminence. Even as we see water levels rising, even as we see polar ice caps compromised, even as we see parts of Florida, actually, Al Gore's last film is fascinating, disappearing underwater, even as we see the evidence, it's too incremental to impact upon humanity in the way that a threat of a slap right now will focus your mind almost exclusively on the threat of the slap right now. And I don't know what the answer to that is, except that there must be an answer, because the younger generation does feel it. Why is that? Why is my generation, and possibly yours, immune to any sense of climate change leading us to imminent catastrophe, whereas a younger generation who inhabit the same world, they live on the same planet, they really get it. They get it so much so that they are today running the risk of incurring the wrath of elderly newspaper columnists by actually doing what we're supposed to want young people to do, which is to care about their own futures and to care about their own environment and to care about their own planet. So come at this from whatever angle you want. Sometimes it usually works when I go around the houses a bit on an introduction, if I'm interesting enough to interest you. And of course, the problem with the climate change conversation is that you often don't find it very interesting either. But that's why I'm being very meta and trying to actually discuss why we're not as interested in this story as by rights we should be. And I know that we could be because the young people are. And the evidence that the young people are is provided by the fact that they're walking out of their schools in their thousands today and protesting. They're essentially saying to the grown-ups, you need to do more. I'm not interested today in talking to grown-ups who turn around and say, no, we don't, because I understand science better than the scientists do. You've got your way with Brexit, you've got your way with Trump. Come back to me when that starts looking good, all right? Because right now, the idea that you know more about climate change than 95% of the world's scientists is the same as the idea that Andrew Bridgen knows more about running Jaguar Land Rover than the bloke who runs Jaguar Land Rover. Young people get it, and to my embarrassment, I don't. Discuss.
As children went on strike to protest about climate change today, the airwaves have been filled with right-on politicians trying to get down with the kids. They claimed if they were still young, they'd be doing the same. Others have called it truancy, plain and simple. For the protesters on the streets, too young to have the right to vote out those in charge of the UK's climate policy, enough is enough. Crisis, what crisis, were three words that helped bring down the Callaghan government. This ecological crisis is being ignored, say the young protesters. It should be declared a state of emergency. The fact it hasn't been is just one of the signs they claim that the older generations have sold them out. Are they right? Is climate change becoming the big intergenerational battle of our time? We sent our economics editor Ben Chu to find out.
Climate change. It's the burning issue for all of us, isn't it? After all, don't we all inhabit the same lonely planet in the vast blackness of space? Well, not necessarily. Without wishing to be indelicate, some of us are going to be on this planet for a lot longer than others. Thousands of young people here in the UK and across the world today walked out of lessons to protest about what they see as a lack of action from middle-aged politicians to cut carbon emissions. Polling from the UK and the US suggests that the younger generation are considerably more worried about climate change than older people.
They need to start taking young people seriously and start listening to our voice and making sure that they recognise in their policy making that we're the ones who have the biggest stake in our future and that they need to change their legislation to reflect that.
I don't want to give trillions and trillions of dollars. I don't want to lose millions and millions of jobs. I don't want to be put at a disadvantage.
Popular pressure is absolutely part of this. Because, politicians respond when their feet are held to the fire. And so, absolutely, that's part of it. There also needs to be political leadership.
Is this a shot we can hear being fired in a generational war? There's a fundamental economic and political tension here. The worst costs of climate change will not be felt for decades.
As we get warmer and warmer, those risks are only going to increase and start to impact food supply, water supply, people's health, and our natural world. Our wildlife species are at risk of, in some cases, going extinct as a result of climate change. But what probably worries me the greatest is the risk of collapse of the vast ice sheets covering Greenland and West Antarctica, which would eventually lead to meters of sea level rise, displacing hundreds of thousands, millions of people.
But the expensive action needed to tackle it, carbon taxes, higher energy bills, tougher regulation, must be borne by people today. Yet are the interests of young and old really in opposition? How should we think about those future economic and social costs of an overheated planet? Policymakers normally use a cost-benefit analysis to decide whether or not to do something. If benefits exceed the costs, government should act. We can estimate the future economic costs of climate change in terms of lost global GDP, but that pain won't be endured until many decades have passed. So how should we value that damage today? Normally costs are discounted on the basis that we will all, hopefully, be richer in the future and they will be easier to bear. That could mean the benefits today of getting rid of future costs of climate change looking smaller than the costs of action, implying we shouldn't act. But what if we don't discount those future costs? That would mean the benefits exceeding today's costs once again, meaning we should act. Nicholas Stern wrote a landmark report on the economics of climate change in 2006 for the UK government. And he used a virtually zero discount rate in his cost-benefit analysis, meaning future climate change costs are treated as if they are being felt now. And Lord Stern concluded that made an overwhelming case for action from governments today to decarbonise.
Because future generations might be worse off than now, you would want to have low discounting. In other words, you would want to value benefits that accrue to them in a rather positive way relative to benefits that accrue now. But discriminating by date of birth, I think most people would regard as morally unacceptable. And it's that position which I took, and that position which I think is a correct one from the point of view of most people's ethical valuations.
So, in other words, according to Lord Stern, damage to generations in the future should be accounted for as damage to lives today.
I think young people are absolutely part and a key to this because they get it, they instinctively get it. But I genuinely believe that we can persuade people across the population that this has got to be a priority. And the way we do that is by saying there can be a better life for people.
If anything disappears, the world will not be complete, and it will be all their fault.
So you think everyone should do something?
Everybody.
Ice cores in Antarctica.
So economic theory suggests young and old really are all in it together. But is that a lesson our politicians can learn?
Interesting one, this. Marina Hyde is, pound for pound, probably the finest political commentator in the country. Certainly possibly the finest writer on British newspapers at the moment. And she's just tweeted something really focuses the mind. This protest, of course, has gone all the way to Parliament Square. This strike by school children over climate change is an international movement that essentially involves children going, why the hell aren't you doing more? You're supposed to be the flipping grown-ups. Of course, this thing I'm clumsily articulating about not knowing why I don't care enough, Marina Hyde has just nailed it completely when she says our generation will never be forgiven for this, and we still don't know what this is. We still don't have a proper understanding of the thing that the younger generation will never forgive us for. It's not too late, but the clock is ticking. Rachel Venables is in Parliament Square with some of these young protesters. Rachel, how are we getting on?
James, what an amazing atmosphere down here at Parliament. It's actually really quite hard to describe. You've got easily over 1,000 school children, talking teens, so people who've bunked off sixth form today, all the way down to very young primary school age kids. And they're all chanting, they're all thrusting signs in the air, they're blowing whistles. They're just here really to have their voices heard. And they were based for quite a while on Parliament Square itself. That's the green patch of grass just outside Westminster. Actually, in the last 5-10 minutes, they've taken to the streets, so they've completely blocked traffic down here. I'm looking at a double-decker bus which has got the top off, so it's clearly obviously one of the city tour sightseeing buses. They've actually boarded that and have taken over the top level. They've reduced all of the traffic in the area to a standstill, chanting and yelling. And I've managed to pull away from the crowd a little bit. I found a group of school children from St Jude's in Lambeth. Guys, just before I came out here, you were chanting. Can you give the LBC listeners a bit of an idea of what it is that you've been doing, what message you want everyone to listen to?
What do we want? Global justice. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Global justice. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Global justice. When do we want it?
Brilliant sounds from them. And I'm also joined by a couple of the kids themselves. Now, Mia and Django, you're both 10. Talk to me about why you wanted to go on strike. You're missing school maths, I think, right now. Why did you want to do that today and fight for this?
Personally, I think global warming is a terrible thing that's happening and it should have been stopped a long time ago.
And what inspired you to do that?
I think that the Prime Minister is doing a terrible job, and that's why I'm out here today.
You think the Prime Minister's doing a terrible job? Just on climate change or on more? Maybe we shouldn't get into that.
Careful.
Very careful. So, listen, there's been so many children out here today. Were you surprised by the scale of this campaign, this protest?
Yeah, I was very surprised, and I'm quite happy to see all the signs and all the children who are just chanting.
Yeah. But do you think Prime Ministers, politicians listen to 10-year-olds enough?
No, I don't actually. I think they should actually get round to doing stuff instead of just like talking.
Yeah. And why is it that climate change worries you guys so much?
That was amazing.
Well, it's our future, and I don't really want to live in a world that's full of junk.
Yeah, climate change is such a bad thing and it really will affect our future if it isn't stopped.
Well, I think it's very clear. I mean, Downing Street's just down the road there. I think Theresa May, if she's in, will be able to hear the chanting. But if she was here right now, what would you tell her? What would you say to her to do?
We've seen better cabinets in IKEA.
No, okay. I wasn't expecting that one. What about you, Django?
I agree with Mia.
You agree with Mia? And what would you tell her to do? What would you say to her to focus on? Is it less Brexit, more climate change? That's what young people want?
Yes, probably.
Yeah, less Brexit.
I've been upstaged, I think, here, James, by these two 10-year-olds. And what's fantastic about this protest is that I have covered so many different protests about many different issues throughout, this country over the last couple of years. And this feels exactly the same. It's the same sort of slogans. It's the same passions. It's just coming from people who are, as you just heard, so much younger.
Could you ask one of these frighteningly articulate young people why they think adults are so stupid on this issue?
All right, I've got a question from James. Why do you think adults are so stupid on this issue? Mia first.
I don't think they realise how much it really will affect our kids and stuff, and I think they really do need to understand how much our futures will be affected.
What about you?
I think they don't actually know how much we actually know about this and how much it actually means to us.
Wow. Will you thank them both for me?
I will, absolutely. Thank you very much, guys, for speaking to us. I think we're going to go back to the chanting now, aren't we? Go back and join the crowds.
Fantastic. Good luck to all of you. That's I found that quite moving, I don't mind telling you. I think as the adults, as those young people quite rightly point out, seem hell-bent upon making an absolutely catastrophic mess of just about everything at the moment, including their futures. There's an optimism and a drive there that's rather lovely. Almost inevitably, Theresa May has already condemned them. Prime Minister has suggested that these people shouldn't be absenting themselves from school because, let me get this right, the disruption increases, this is a deputy official spokesperson, disruption increases teachers' workloads and wastes lesson time that teachers have carefully prepared for. So, my phone lines are, not inevitably actually, after I've spent 5 minutes telling you how hard it is to get people interested in this issue, but we will now free up a couple for teachers. A genuine question. I'm not being rhetorical. She might have a point. Is this disruptive from a teacher's point of view? For the day before you break up for half term, come on, this is old school bench stuff, isn't it? We break up, we break down. We don't care if school falls down. No more English, no more French, no more sitting on the old school bench. That's what you normally sing on today. That's what, well, possibly not for a few decades. But the idea that today is a day when you're going to be doing really heavy lifting academically seems to me a little bit I'd be kind to Theresa May, as deputy official spokesperson, and say a little bit naive. Mike's in Northampton. Mike, what an amazing little intervention that was from Rachel Venables and her friends in Parliament Square. What made you pick up the phone?
Yeah, I caught the end of something you said. I just switched the radio on, and apologies if I'm misparaphrasing you, but I think you said that big business was causing people to act against their own interest in climate change.
Not really big business. I mean, certainly the fossil fuels industry on this case, but I'm not going to get on my high horse about John Lewis.
Okay. But my point was, or one of my points, if I can make a couple, one of my points was that I think we all do benefit from consumerism. It's not just useless consumerism. There are actual benefits, and we shouldn't ignore those.
I think possibly you should have listened to a bit more before you rang in, but that's partly our fault for putting you through.
Okay, but
no, it's because we're not talking about any of the things you seem to think that we are.
Okay, all right.
So have a listen to the next 20 minutes or so, and then give us a buzz. So why are older people not as alert to the imminent threat to our planet as those young people are? And even as we're made alert by these people, why aren't they telling us? Andre's in Switzerland. Andre, what do you think?
Hi, Jez. So I think there's a fairly obvious answer, which I think is that older people basically don't see the urgency that younger people do, because it still sort of feels a bit abstract.
It might be obvious in the sense that it's almost certainly true, but it falls down a bit when you start counting. So at what age does it become urgent rather than abstract? Do you see what I mean? So I look back in my rear-view mirror. I'm 47. Most of my colleagues under 30 see this as a given. They don't see their reality reflected normally in news media. So what is it? 33? Where's the cut-off point?
I mean, there's things like. I think a lot of people above a certain age, maybe I don't know where it is, maybe 30s, 40s, 50s. They don't, to put it bluntly, they don't think they're going to be around to feel the worst effect. Even when you hear things like the IPCC report saying,
yes,
you've got 12 years to act.
Yes.
To a 12-year-old, that means they're going to be in their mid-20s before there's essentially irreparable damage.
But we've all got children. A massive majority of those people in the age groups you describe will have children and or grandchildren. So they should be. It shouldn't be so easy to turn off our concern.
Should. I just think it feels more tangible to someone when they realise that for most of their life, the world could be completely different to what we know it.
I also now find myself wondering why the propaganda put out by the fossil fuel industry and their friends in the lobbying sector doesn't seem...
So then there's two things, I think. I mean, the cynical argument is that also a lot of politicians, decision makers and so on are kind of in the pocket of those industries or interested in profiting from it. But I think for a lot of the general population, it just doesn't feel real enough that as it does for much younger people.
You're giving us the what, not the why. And I think you're right. And I want the why. The why doesn't quite work on imminence because I care more about my children. I mean, what does everybody say when they become a parent for the first time? I didn't know this person yesterday. Today, I'd throw myself under a bus for them. So you throw yourself under a bus for your babies, but you wouldn't catch a bus and leave the car. Oh, that was good. I've got to stop doing that. I've got to stop interrupting myself halfway through to give myself a pat on the back. You throw yourself under a metaphorical bus for your babies, but you won't get on an actual one and leave the car at home. Explain that.
Now, thousands of school children across the country have walked out of their classrooms to protest over climate change. The young activists joined global school strikes to demonstrate against what they believe to be a lack of action from politicians. Some schools allowed their pupils to walk out, but many warned they could be punished for not going to class. Kamian Zeram reports.
They can't vote, but they sure can shout. Across the country, thousands of young people defied the rules and went on strike. Which green do those who can vote care about most? Because tackling climate change can't wait. Tallulah, in the middle here, persuaded her mum that getting in trouble was worth the risk.
The head teacher said, you know, if they go, then they commit truancy. And we decided, her dad and we said, you know, it's important.
Yeah, I was disappointed because I wanted to make a contribution. And when I found out that I couldn't, I was really upset.
Are you happy that your mum let you come?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Well, we only have one world, and when it's gone, it's gone. There's nothing we can do about it. So.
But for some schools, the protests provided valuable learning. In Windmill Primary, Oxford, the march itself would be citizenship in action, and an art lesson used materials recycled by students.
We're having a picket line on the school gate all day where children have made banners, and they're going to be out there just putting it out to our local community that we care and that, you know, we really want to make a stand on this.
And have you had any pushback?
No, not one parent has said anything negative in any sense to me.
The youngest people on this march are only 5 years old. They don't have a vote. This is the way that they use their voice. They are saying, please listen to us. It's our future. If we don't act now, it'll be too late.
Why are you guys here today?
We're here to march and save our planet.
You're here to save the planet?
We're here to warn people that climate change is coming and we need to stop it. We've only got 12 years to fix this, or we can't do it.
What do you think of grown-ups then who aren't doing as much as you'd like them to do?
Well, I think that they just don't care really, because it's not their future.
This was one of dozens of youth-led events from Brighton to Belfast. Nice day out for student activists? Far from it, said the organiser of the Oxford March.
This is not just a day of fun. We are not here to have a jolly and shout. You know, we don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. I have my A-level exams very soon. I don't want to be having to take time off school but I'd rather have a secure future.
Who does have the power to halt irreversible climate change? A global problem undermined by President Trump's damaging decision to pull the US out of the Paris Agreement, and the UK making progress but still not on track to meet its own carbon targets. It is our future, say the nation's youth, and it is not okay.
Well, joining me now are 5 activists who have been involved in different ways today. Bella Lack and Izzy Warren, who took to the streets of Westminster to protest and raise awareness on climate change, and Salma Shahzadi and Amy Clapham and Abby Silver-Matthews, who instead chose to put pen to paper and write a petition. So first of all, I mean, how did it go today? What was it like?
It went amazingly. The turnout far exceeded our expectations.
And what's your sort of impression of having... I mean, you're not a newcomer to activism or protest, are you?
No.
But this must have been the biggest thing you've been part of.
By far, I've never done anything like this, and also to have perspective in it as an organiser, like seeing how this has gone from a movement of just a few people and to what it became today with thousands was incredible.
What do you think you achieved?
Well, first of all, the press coverage has been outstanding, and
so it's being here, it's getting this kind of attention.
The fact that we are here just talking about this is testament to that. And yeah, it's been extraordinary, and the conversation around climate change that has taken place this week has been amazing as well.
Now you agree with what they were doing, don't you, all of you today, but you chose not to take part. Salma, why not?
Well, we did ask for authorisation, but since we weren't allowed, we decided instead to create a petition within our school, and we're hoping to get enough signatures on it so that we can send it to our MP to get it debated in Parliament. What we want is maybe some stricter policies surrounding things that contribute towards climate change, like CO2 emissions, yeah.
And so it was the school who said, no, you can't do this?
Yes.
I mean, so why didn't you defy the school and say, well, that's the point of a strike, isn't it, or a protest?
I mean, we was kind of afraid of the sanctions. We didn't really want to get in trouble, and because it's so close to our exams, and we thought, how can we make a difference inside school without going rebelling against the rules?
And having seen, you know, what was going on today, I mean, do you wish you'd been part of it? Did you want to be there?
We did want to be there, but I feel like the way that we went about this as well was also really good, because a lot of students in our school didn't actually know what was happening today. So going around and asking them all to sign and giving little speeches to them about what climate change is and what we're trying to achieve, I feel like we also made quite a good contribution.
How do you think it compares? You know, a petition as opposed to that kind of physical presence on the streets. Do you think it has anything like the same kind of impact?
Well, I think the main reason that I didn't want to go to this kind of action is because sometimes it does cause safety issues. And for me, we knew that we could do something else that would also have the same impact as going out in the streets, because usually government officials don't really recognise this sort of stuff.
What would you say to them about those worries and those concerns?
Well, I really respect and admire their petition, and I mean, we're not opposing each other in any way. We fully.
You just have different tactics.
Yeah, we're working together. But we had 4 demands today, and these demands were really supported by the protest and by the publicity it gained. And I think if we hadn't had that, then they really wouldn't have been as effective as they were. And it just wouldn't have garnered the attention that it did.
Does your school give you authorisation?
No, so I emailed them last night to tell them that I would be attending the protest, and I have my first GCSE next month, so I will obviously spend the half term catching up, and there's no way that I want to miss school, obviously. And my studies mean a lot to me, but I mean, right now we're presiding over an ecological apocalypse, and there's no way that we can just overlook this as we have done.
How about you, Izzy? Did you have permission?
I was given permission when I emailed probably 2 months before the actual event happened. And I was the only person who had emailed, and my school gave me permission. And a lot of people since have emailed, and the school said they can't authorise that many people going for, again, health and safety reasons.
They couldn't?
Yeah, they said.
So why did they give you? I mean, it's really odd, to be honest, for a school to give you permission to bunk off to go on a protest.
My school was. Our school has been incredibly supportive, and both of us spoke at the protest today. And they've been very supportive of what we were doing, and a lot of the responses that we've been getting, but also the responses that people at other schools have been getting, is we support the cause, we support what you stand for, but we don't support what you're doing about it and the way you're going about it.
I mean, what today is really about is saying this generation of politicians and previous ones have made a right mess of things, isn't it? So I mean,
absolutely.
What do you know? Why do you think they failed? Who wants to pick that up? Sam.
I think they've sort of just overlooked climate change, and especially since we're students, 16 years old, and they're not going to take it seriously because they think we're just kids. But the thing is, it's our future, and we should be able to take control of our future.
But do you have any sense of what it is you think they should have done that they haven't done?
Yeah, they should try and make stricter policies or something to just reduce the speed that it's increasing at, because it's going so fast that 12 years from now, the damage will be so devastating that it will be irreversible, and we can't let it get to that stage.
Abby, were you trying to get in?
I mean, it's understandable why people might have overlooked it, because there's so many current affairs going on at the moment, and it's not most recognised. But I think we should start recognising it more. And yes, there are other things going on in the world, like Brexit, for example. But we need to start making more of a focus on things.
Do you feel let down on all of that as well? I mean, do you feel let down by politicians in general, or is it just on this issue?
I think politicians have for so long been ignoring people our age because we can't vote, because we don't have that level of political power yet. And I think I can speak for all of us when I say that we feel betrayed by the people who have the power right now, because we don't have that level of power. We don't have the level of power that our parents have. And it's difficult to see that this is our future that they're making decisions about. It's our future they're throwing away.
But I mean, the truth is that politicians always back off climate change because of the cost to people's lives. Yeah. You know, whether you've got to pay more on your electricity bill or change your life. Are you saying you are prepared to forego things that your parents have enjoyed?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the cost to people's lives in monetary terms pales in comparison to the cost on actual lives, not only
also
of humans, but of species.
You know, are you prepared to just use public transport, not have a car?
Yeah, well, I think convenience isn't even an issue when we consider what's happening. This isn't an abstract concept in the future. Right now, people are actually being killed, and not just humans, animals as well, and they're going extinct because of this. And for example, the island of Kiribati is already having to evacuate. So as you can see, this is a crisis happening today.
Amy, are you sort of inspired by what's happened today? I mean, do you think, has this sort of made you a radical in any way?
Well, today, basically,
You know, will you go on the next demo, is what I'm saying, I suppose.
I would really like to. I think that Amy and Salma here
Sorry,
as well.
Abby.
Yeah. That Amy and Salma here as well, we all really wanted to join in this protest, but I feel like as well as doing the protest, maybe we could get an online petition as well to get more people involved, so that way we've got kind of a bit of both things going on.
And just in a word, next time, would you go?
If I wasn't in the middle of like an academic pathway, yes, I would, yeah.
Salma?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, maybe some new recruits.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much indeed. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Man, it's sort of a little self-referential today, but of course I'm using myself as a lens through which to examine the bigger story. I'm a case study, because if you're close to my age, you are more likely to feel as I do about climate change than your children do. And I don't really get it. And it can't be as simple as saying it's imminent for them, because they're my children. I love them more than life itself. And the idea that I'm going to leave them with a planet that is edging ever closer to being uninhabitable. The story about insects earlier this week, I think I mentioned it to you, but that is I'll share the details with you again, actually. The insect story is, it's epochal. It really is. And I do think, the more I think about it, that this fear of the future that we didn't no, we did, didn't we? If you're older than me, you had the fear of nuclear war, the actual tests where you'd have to hide under the stairs, or I don't know if you've seen When the Wind Blows, the animated version of Raymond Briggs's book with a brilliant soundtrack by Bowie, one of Bowie's most underrated. Or not even underrated, because everyone who's heard it rates it, but I think it didn't reach the audience it would have done, because it was attached to a film about a nuclear apocalypse. When the Wind Blows, God, that was a beautiful song. Had it on a 12-inch, bought it in Woolworths. I digress slightly. Here's the point. There is something about your generation that determines how fearful you are of the future. And in the context of climate change, it doesn't make sense to me at this point. Steve's in Marlborough. Steve, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Steve.
I think one of the reasons is people just don't know enough about it. I work in the media, so my full-time job is I'm a TV director.
Okay.
But one of the things that I also do is I teach carbon literacy training to the TV industry. So, for example, on Monday, I was running a course at UK TV, teaching people about exactly what's happening. And what surprises me is how little people know when they arrive in the morning, even the basics about it.
Yes,
and yet,
guilty,
as the day goes on, suddenly the penny drops. And then what's also good is once people start learning about it, they understand that there are lots of things that we can do to change the situation. You know, we have all the solutions we need to have a sustainable future that doesn't need to go down this path. The difference is it's a question of action or inaction. So at the moment, it's very easy for us all to just carry on as normal. There's no reason to stop us from just carrying on as normal. What needs to happen is government need to start actually being brave enough to take the actions that are going to be unpopular, but the actions that will kind of elicit some sort of change. And as we saw with, Blue Planet, suddenly it took a moment on television for the public to sort of demonstrate to the government that they care about plastics. What we need to find are those Blue Planet moments for climate change. And I think what's going on today might be one of those.
Do you? Do you think this could be a Gestalt switch, if that's the right phase, or a pendulum swinging moment?
I think it could if it carries on. I mean, I think your analogy with sort of nuclear fear when I was growing up, I'm a similar age to you.
Yes.
And, that sort of idea of joining CND marches and things like that, really kind of, I was terrified of the idea of a bomb dropping. And I think Extinction Rebellion, in fact, is probably the new CND.
They're the people who are behind a lot of public protests at the moment.
Yeah, they're not behind this today.
No, but they do. They do disrupt airports and things like that.
Absolutely, and
traffic. And again, no, but this is where I need your help, because this is so bizarre. I suppose if you spend your life working in certain elements of the media, some of it's going to rub off on you. But even I get annoyed with them, even as I know they're doing good work. It's insane.
Yeah, but, it's fascinating, isn't it? One really significant thing happened last year with the BBC, because after the debacle on the Today programme, where Ofcom...
Nigel Lawson.
Yeah, exactly, and they had to get the Met Office on the next day.
What's the address of his climate change group? What's the address? Can you...
I can't remember. What, Nigel Lawson's?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to Google it while you keep talking. You carry on.
I'm sure it's sort of run by the same dodgy people that you talk about all the time. But what significantly happened, for the first time last year, the BBC decided that BBC journalists no longer have to present climate change as part of a balanced debate.
That's right.
And I think that you would have noticed over the last few months the increase in climate change stories that are appearing on the 10 o'clock news. And a colleague of mine, someone that I know very well, who's been spending a lot of time giving climate literacy training to BBC journalists, and they now are beginning to get it. They understand it. And also they understand that measuring the success of a country now isn't all about GDP. It's also about sort of other things. You know, you can't just measure the success of the future in terms of GDP as well. I mean, James, I'm confused as to why you don't care more about it.
Well, I do care more, and I've just looked it up. I wanted to double-check. It does indeed, Lawson. I think he might have stepped down from chairing it or some, but it is indeed at 55 Tufton Street.
Yeah.
The lobby group, the climate...
Hardly surprised. And of course, there is a climate change and Brexit thing as well.
Of course there is. It's false equivalence. Here's a brilliant economist who knows what he's talking about, or indeed here's the Governor of the Bank of England. Here's Nadine Dorries as well to offer up the alternative view.
Yeah. So all of the people that tend to want Brexit sort of believe that climate change isn't happening. And also,
no, that's not fair. I'm going to pause you there. Not all of the people who yes.
All of them.
Plenty of people who are still persuaded that Brexit will be something other than an untrammelled catastrophe probably also recognise the reality of climate science. But it's a bit like racism. I think you'd struggle to find a climate change denier who wasn't a Brexiter, but it's not fair at all to suggest that all Brexiters are climate change deniers. Same with racism. You're going to struggle to find a racist who isn't pro-Brexit. But to suggest that everyone who's pro-Brexit is a racist is both wrong and profoundly offensive, actually.
Okay, yeah, no, correct. But just imagine this, you know, with Brexit, we're being told that we can get sort of import cheap meat from kind of Australia and Argentina and cheap vegetables from Kenya. We can't afford the air miles for importing food like that. How do you think that's going to affect the kind of emissions?
If I gave you a magic wand, where would you wave it? What would you do first? Because I think the young people seem to be on it, and yet the change that's needed has to probably come from people who are no longer young and never will be young again. So how do those young people in Parliament Square with Rachel somehow inject their understanding and their passion into older people?
Well, I think it would be good for a start for the media to start properly reporting on this, and so that means kind of commissioning content. Now,
but then you've got the problem I highlighted at 12 o'clock, which is that in this kind of media, I think we've got an excuse for saying, oh, we're not going to cover that because it doesn't make the phones ring. But now that attitude has infected everyone from the Radio 4 Today programme right through to Newsnight, my former parish, I know for a fact, and no one would deny this, and it's not really a criticism, it's more a description of reality. We're all chasing clicks and bites and likes now. The idea of this being the most important story in town, therefore it's going to lead the news bulletins, is in retreat as a simple philosophical concept.
So when David Attenborough stands up there and says, you know, we are facing the collapse of civilization, you know, the most trusted celebrity that we have.
Bingo, exactly.
And people don't think they should phone in about that and talk about it.
No.
I'm surprised. Do you, perhaps, you know, what's interesting is recently an ITN journalist who came to one of these courses said, oh, we didn't used to come to these things in the past because it was all a bit science and a bit dull and a bit dry. But what we're realising now is it's about human stories. You know, people dying in forest fires. People die, you know, that town last year in America where hundreds of people were killed. Very, you know,
yes, but then Donald Trump goes on the telly when it's snowing and says, "Oh, so much for global warming," and all of the impact of the deaths that you describe is undone by a great big orange idiot.
That's why we need you, James, to do for climate change what you do for Brexit. You need
that's
to
going well.
Analyse it, and it's going brilliantly, isn't it? Though, because you know you've got people engaged with Brexit. People phone up every day and talk to you about it. So if you were to sit down and forensically unpick what's going on with climate change,
but we've got 42 days until Brexit, mate. The whole point about climate change is that there's no ticking clock. That's what we need, isn't it?
Well, there is.
No, the IPCC did put out a ticking clock. We've got 12 years to reduce carbon emissions to near to zero. Otherwise, we effect permanent damage to, and potentially lethal damage to our planet. I sat here with that mother that wonderful mother the other day whose little girl died of an asthma attack and has now had it put on the coroner's report that was linked to air pollution. It's a little girl passing away. And, yes, that was it. And Ella Kissy Deborah.
Yeah.
And that doesn't move us. I don't understand why, Steve. I don't get why that doesn't nudge the needle. It's not just because of the amount of effort being put into telling lies from the incredibly well-funded other side. It's deeper than that.
But it requires even more effort from us to sort of try and correct that. I mean, what's interesting, what's fascinating is, I've been involved in teaching this for about 5 years. It's very slow. Every time we do it, we get about 20 people. Most of the time they come, they're production coordinators, they're not producers and directors. But slowly, I have noticed a change over recent years, and slowly it's beginning to have an effect, and slowly journalists are starting to understand. And I just think we have to keep on with it. It's going to be a slow process.
Yes, it is.
We need to somehow accelerate it. And it's brilliant that you're talking about this today.
I had very little choice, given that the children are absolutely revolting today, in the nicest possible way. It's a powerful story. Every journalist that I've seen covering it is reacting a little bit like Rachel Venables did. There's a genuine sense of shock and optimism, shock and joy, actually, at seeing young people not only who care so much, but who can explain why. And that kid off the cuff, who said, I've seen better cabinets in IKEA. Oh, come on, it's going to be after my job. Gemma is in Wolverhampton. Gemma, why are grown-ups so stupid?
First of all, I want to say those 10-year-old girls are just absolutely amazing. They gave me hope for the future. Second of all, I know this is probably going to ruffle a few feathers with people, but I think there is an element of guilt with the older generation. The fact that, this planet, everything's disposable. We can do what we want because we're humans, and now we've left the kids to deal with it. The kids are the ones that actually are facing all these terrible consequences of global warming and climate change and everything. So obviously they are having what should be the natural reaction, and I think the adults are kind of blinded by a little bit of guilt, I don't want to admit to what I've done.
Yeah, you're bang on, aren't you? Sometimes I think we probably need to bring things down to brass tacks to get a proper understanding of them, instead of going all highfalutin and looking for the academic explanation. So we know, it's a cognitive dissonance. We know that we're at fault, but we don't want to admit it, so it's easier not to think about it at all.
And I suppose you could kind of go on a deep level and think, is this our fault? Because the big corporations say, buy, don't fix things anymore, buy new. You could go into that, but ultimately we're all guilty of it. Classic example, with people around me, like my council for recycling, all you have to do is chuck the recycling in the bin. You don't even have to sort it out. When they're bought in the recycling and they're, everyone's all, oh my gosh, why are we recycling? I shouldn't have to. I pay my council tax, like they're entitled to dump waste.
Yeah, it is. It's a curious mixture of entitlement. Normally, the people who are responsible for ruining the future are obsessed with the past. So normally you would be able to get the sort of nostalgia fetishizers to say, maybe we need to do it like that. We need to go back to when the air was clean. We need to go back to when the bins. Maybe that's the way we could sell it to.
I thought that you're going to go with the black country called the black country because it was absolutely covered in stuff.
Yeah, I know.
But really, the way that I see it, you've got the really, really old generation where, you don't waste a single thing. Everything gets reused, everything gets upcycled. A pram would last family generations. Yes. And then you've got kind of the middle generation where, it's all right, we'll buy everything brand new, and then income credit cards, so everyone was buying everything brand new and nothing was recycled and nothing was upcycled. And then I feel like I'm a little bit in the middle between the middle generation and the kids generation, because when I was growing up it was all don't litter. There was all the don't litter campaigns, and the ring pulls on the cans, they can hurt the animals and stuff. So I was really, I kind of.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 28.
Yeah, I was going to say you sound a lot younger than me, because I mean, we
don't feel it.
It was never environmental for my generation. It was just about being tidy. Whereas your lot got much stronger lessons on why your behaviour had consequences, and that's supposed to be something that the people who fetishise the past are always banging on about. It's why they're in favour of beating up children and calling it corporal punishment, because actions should have consequences. But climate change science is the biggest free pass possible.
We don't want to face the consequences.
It's not me.
Of our
My
actions, though, do we?
my actions shouldn't have consequences. I'm Boris Johnson. I should be able to do whatever the hell I want, which was roughly the contents of that letter from his teacher to his father that we read out yesterday. Everybody else, they should have to obey the rules and live by these consequences. Not me. I'm moving my funds to Dublin. Gemma, thank you. Theo is in Hive. Theo, Hive? What would you like to say, Theo?
I was listening to a call that you had not too long ago with the guy that's associated to television. Forgive me, I don't remember all of it.
That's all right, crack on.
But, I think I may have the answer, or I'd like your opinion on what I think the answer is, but it's to do with us now slowly becoming a destructive species, a self-destructive species. And the reason why I go down that road is if you consider the example of dieting, we all should be the people that are slowly killing themselves with the food that is fed to us by corporate organisations to make themselves money and us slowly kill ourselves, we shouldn't be eating it and we should be dieting. But we don't because it's easier
Nanny
to
state,
eat
mate.
and consume these things.
Nanny
it's
state.
easier to do it the other way.
Now, what's the address of the Taxpayers Alliance, who are always putting up spokespeople to explain why it's wrong for governments to try to legislate to help children not eat as much sugar or not do things that are damaging to their health? Because the climate change thing that Nigel Lawson chills for, that was at 55 Tufton Street. Does anyone know the address of the Taxpayers Alliance? Theo, any thoughts?
I'm not sure, but I have a feeling
it's 55 Tufton Street, my friend. You carry on.
Now, to compare the dieting analogy onto global warming, we've seen enough examples. I think it's silly to say that we don't know. No, that's not true. It probably isn't silly to say we don't know enough. We could all learn more, but we should know enough now to know that we are causing a problem to our planet. However, it's easier to continue to drive these really nice cars that are advertised to us.
Yeah, that is very true. I mean, electric cars marking an improvement in things, but not a solution. That is very
they're
true.
on their way, but it's work. It's not as attractive as some of the vehicles that are out now. But that's just one example.
It is, and I think I'm Incorrigible has tweeted to remind me that apparently I once suggested that I was now going to start taking things seriously, so much so I'd start getting public transport to work instead of a car. But then, of course, I'd run the risk of being late, Theo, and I don't think the country could cope with that, could it?
It's just easier. We're all I think a lot of us are in a similar boat in that it's easier.
We could all do more, and we're looking for the excuse not to do more, and lo and behold, here are people funded to the tune of billions by fossil fuels industry while refusing to reveal who fuels them, telling us that we don't need to do more at all, and giving us every excuse to carry on doing stuff that's really, really bad and is going to compromise our children's future and possibly destroy our planet. But until then, whoever is mysteriously bankrolling these people, encouraging us to do bad things to ourselves and our children, will continue to make more money than they would have done if they weren't promoting the idea that we should carry on doing bad things to ourselves, our children and our planet. Vote Brexit. John's in Erith. John, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello,
I think I know why you and I don't care more about the issue than we should do.
Yes. How old are you? My phone line's gone nuts. I don't know what you've just done, but that really went through me like fingernails on a blackboard, and Sheila Fogarty just winced as she came through the door. I hope we can squeeze him in, otherwise Robert in Wilson will get the last word. Robert, what would you like to say?
It was just nice to speak to you.
That's even worse. Back to John in Erith. I'm playing Phone Wars. John, how are you getting on?
Hello.
Carry on.
Oh, sorry, James. I was going to say, I think I know why you and I both don't care more about it, because by the time the effects come, we'll probably be dead.
No, but I love my children more than I love you or me.
But your immediate concern is your immediate concern.
No, it's not. It's not. Everything I do is for my children. Well, not everything. I'm not Bryan Adams, but I genuinely, you know what it is. You everybody says, and it's true. You would throw yourself under a bus to save your child, and yet you wouldn't think of catching a bus. I'm having that. Can someone sell that to Greenpeace? I want a royalty on that. That's brilliant. But it's true. I'd throw myself under a bus for them, but I wouldn't catch a bus.
And I know you would, but the immediate always crowds out the important. So your immediate concern are to feed and clothe them and house them. Your immediate concern...
I'm putting money away for when I'm not here anymore, because I'm so worried about what's going to happen to social mobility in this country, and people like me with a middle-class background are going to be pushed into the background.
But that's the irony of the situation, isn't it? I think every generation wants better for their kids than they had themselves. But at the same time, that's about their immediate needs. What inheritance they've got, are they going to
Yeah, no, you're probably right. So we need to rejig it, and we need to make it more relevant. And that is the end of the best climate change conversation I think that we have ever had on the programme. And thinking about, and talking indeed about, brilliant things that have happened on this programme. I'm very sad to report that one of my favourite ever colleagues is moving on to pastures new. And one of the reasons why the show is currently enjoying by far its biggest audience ever is because I feel so well looked after and so happy in the studio. So I'd like to wish Ivan all the very, very best for whatever it is he's going to do next. And now I'm going to go and beat him up for abandoning me.